This is so that people who are on
Feedback.
people who are on the Zoom remotely, when they get up and ask a question, they will be able to see them. These folks will be able to see them on their laptop, but we thought it might be helpful for you to be able to see them.
If you get up to speak, you can come up to the podium. If you have notes, you can put them there, but you're going to speak to the room, but Paul will make sure that you are trained.
I'll operate this.
And that'll make sure that people remotely see you and
When part of the recording.
Okay.
So presentation, that's this was a little bit of
Okay, I'm going to call the 5:10 LIFAC meeting to order. My name is Mary Marshall. I'm the chair. This is Chris Coburn. He's the vice chair. This is Judy Olson, who's the secretary. Mike McKinsey, who's going to be our flag bearer this evening. Todd Legacy is a committee member, as is Jim Dickinson, and it looks like Rich Fry is not here this evening.
He is here on the Zoom.
Okay, terrific.
Mary, would you turn your video on, please?
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, and we also have as a guest this evening, Randy Rydell, who will be explaining some of the changes that we have experienced over the last month or 6 months, however you're counting. And if you would like to speak this evening during the public comment section, just make sure you signed up, and then somebody needs to pass that list to us up here so I can call everybody. So let's do a flag salute and then we'll have a moment of silence. So.
Pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, now as is tradition, we'll go ahead and have just a moment of silence and get ourselves set for this evening's meeting. Okay. All right, and I want to make just a couple of comments this evening. First of all, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate that. And I want to thank Leslie and Bob for doing the Zoom, and for Bob Anderson for loaning us a couple of laptops for this. Very much appreciate that. I want to remind everyone that LIFAC is in fact an advisory committee to Whatcom County. We don't make decisions, but rather we work with Public Works and Council and the Islanders to make recommendations to all things regarding ferry. So I just want to keep that out there. And given the rather interesting, contentious meeting that we had in April, I'd also like to remind everybody that this meeting will be conducted with respect for everyone. Any unprofessional or disrespectful behavior won't be allowed. I really want to personally apologize to Chris Colburn for some derogatory comments that were made at the last meeting that implied he didn't belong here since he didn't live on the island. I know this does not represent who we are as Islanders. A better representation of us are the signs that were in the roads last summer that said, "Drive islandly." And I think that's who we are as a community. And I know that, and I think things just got a little out of hand. So I'd like everybody to behave islandly this evening, if we can.
It's a good one.
And the reason that there are 2 LIFAC members who do not live on the island is because, well, there's multiple reasons, but mainly we are only less than, let's see, 0.04 of 1%. So we're a fourth of 1% of the population of Whatcom County. So our population is pretty small in comparison to the larger county. And yet we need the largest vehicle in the county. And so when LIFAC was put together, the decision was made to have two people who represent the rest of Whatcom County. And I, for one, think that's a good idea.
And it can even be 3.
Okay.
Right.
So anyway, I apologize. I know the people that said those things didn't really mean them. Since we got together last, we do have some updates. Diane Harper and a working group committee uncovered an old memo from 2010. Is Diane here tonight? Okay, she's on video. Okay. So, and it's referred to as the Monson memo, and it was from 2010, and it had some significant impact on how the fare box and fund, Randy will do a better job at explaining all this, but how we are to apply the motor vehicle fuel tax. When Randy had an opportunity to review it, he recognized that it could have a significant impact on the ferry fares, and not just today, but historically. So unlike the last deep dive that he did, because he was asked to do it, and he discovered something that misinterpreted earlier data and caused the deficit to be worse, this one actually reversed everything in the other direction. And so it's actually put us back in the black, which is good news, which is great news. So Randy's here tonight to explain that in better detail. Lastly, I'll just say that let's try to remember that everybody's opinion is valid and valuable. Let's make sure that we're all heard and that we assume positive intent. I think this will really help us to have a great meeting this evening. So before we get started with open session, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes. Okay, do I have a second?
And I do have an addition.
Okay,
And this goes to what you said. I know people who said some things that turned out were directed at me, didn't really mean them. But I also think it's important to have a note in the written record about that. So they aren't in the minutes as presented. I'd like a note added.
Okay.
I have a Post-it, but it says a comment was shouted at me, at Chris Colburn, by an unidentified community member who said, "You don't even live here. Why don't you go home?" And I just think that needs to be in the written record.
Okay.
So that we have
Judy.
some guideposts, which is really what that's about.
Okay, so let's have an approval of the minutes with that amendment. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All those opposed?
What about Rich Fry on the?
I noticed that Rich Fry and Todd Donovan are
Okay.
both on.
Oh,
yeah,
great. That's
Todd
good to
Donovan
know.
is on.
Good to know. And
Okay.
Rich was thumbs up. Okay.
Okay, Jim? Approve?
Minutes.
The meeting kind of shut down in a big hurry. I don't quite know what to say about that, so. I think I'll just abstain.
Okay, so 2 abstentions to the minutes and 5 approvals. The minutes are passed. Okay, so thank you, Pam. Could you have me that list? Thank you so much. So did everyone that wants to speak tonight, did you get a chance to put your name down? Okay, so Bob, would you like to go first?
Sure. Okay, hold on 1 minute. Actually, we need, unmute them.
And we do have some hands online that would like to speak as well. It looks like, Leslie.
Okay.
And I will do the timer.
Yeah, it is
Yes, I
3
tried.
minutes, and we will stop you.
Sorry for you to speak. You know, this video. Put something for the option.
Oh, sure. Oh, you put you down?
I had to,
Thank you.
I had to ask.
Mary, before you click me in on the timer, I'd like to just briefly address Chris's comment, adding to
Can't
those
put it
minutes.
on, I can ask to
that,
start video. So you have to start
Many of
video.
us in this room felt ashamed of that comment. And a number of us spoke, I think, called you, some people that you know, to express that that is not the view of our community toward you. But I'd like the minutes to reflect that. They were today's.
I got one call.
Okay, well, I thought you had more, but my point is, that if we're going to have that in the minutes from last meeting, I'd like it to be reflected in today's minutes.
Sure.
That we are not supportive of that kind of behavior or that kind of expression.
And before we click you on, it's not a personal thing, but it is a matter of how the process and the committee is respected.
Yes, I agree. We all agree to that. Okay, so I am Bob Anderson. I've been at this podium before. I've been on this island for 20 years. Our home is down on Seacrest. And a couple of months ago, we formed, out of concern for where we felt things were, a work group to provide information, analyses, and recommendations regarding the ferry system issues, specifically about ordinance amendments and fare increases. I've been asked to just serve as a moderator for that group. I've been pleased to do that. We have a group of 12 islanders who have experience in legal, accounting, finance, many other areas, including Whatcom County processes and code language development. But most importantly, as I've come to understand working with this work group, they care a lot about the ferry. They care a lot about the ferry as a critical resource for our island. And they have a depth of knowledge and history about the ferry, its financing and operations. And we really want to tap that, and we want you to tap it. We work group members were actually very pleased and actually buoyed by the outcome of the last council meeting on April 25th, when we heard Public Works withdraw their ferry fare proposal and endorse the council's decision to suspend action on their proposed ordinance changes. We felt that we had provided important information to Public Works that caused them to rethink their proposed fare plan, and we applaud their willingness to, at somewhat the last moment, to recommend a change in plans. That was a good move. And we appreciate Councilmember Donovan's thoughtful voice in the course of the deliberations of the council to put a pause on any decisions until more accurate and complete information can be developed to formulate amendments to the ordinance for the June 20th council meeting and in the ferry fairs later this year. But what is even more satisfying and frankly hopeful for our group, for our work group, is the possibility of having a more collaborative and complementary relationship and engagement with LIFAC, with Public Works and the County Council. One in which the needs and the interests of our islanders are better articulated and a deeper understanding of issues and concerns on all sides is achieved. To this end, we have proposed to LIFAC to create an ad hoc committee comprised of a subset of LIFAC members with 4 of our work group members, and we sincerely hope that that request receives favorable response at tonight's meeting. In less than a month, just think, less than a month ago, the last LIFAC meeting, when most of us left with a sense of disappointment and in the inconclusive outcome and the many conflicting comments that were expressed, we stand here tonight with a readiness to roll up our sleeves, to contribute our best thinking and listening skills in an effort to work together between now and June 14th, when LIFAC convenes again. Our hope is to generate a consensus view on ordinance amendments that will create the framework for our ferry system for the next few years and for the new future ferry in our future. Now, following me, time is up. Following me are 4 other work group members. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Rayma?
Rayma Blake and
Former.
former LIFAC member, cheerleader, and actually, I'm here just to celebrate the process and thank LIFAC for keeping on. It's about making good choices, and I'm thrilled that we're here together talking about what the possibilities are. It started back with the 2010 task force, ferry task force, and Jim was on that. Jim has been involved in many significant aspects of LIFAC through the time. So he actually was one of the people suggesting a task force kit or a LIFAC kit form. I worked with Councilmember Carl Weimer to get it formed, and it's exactly what we need for moments like this. So thank you for keeping on. Thank you for listening to Islanders and ad hoc committees, and thank you for incorporating new information from Public Works, because we all have to work together to move forward. So we need to keep the county solvent and the island vibrant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raymond. Janice Holmes?
My name's Janice Holmes, and I think it's important to discuss what matters here. And I think it doesn't matter how long we've lived on the island, and it doesn't matter if we don't live on the island. It doesn't matter if we were born here or we moved here last week. What matters is that we have a vested interest in the efficient and fair operation of government and our government services. That's what's important here, and that's what we need to work out. I have been involved with this working group, and no one in our meetings has said, well, how long have you lived here? Do you have something important to offer? The criteria has been expertise, and we have taken a deep dive into the ferry operations, and all of the information we reviewed is public record. We just took a deep dive, we analyzed it. The Munson letter was sent to Frank Abart in 2010. This was all public record, it was all available. It just needs to be reviewed and looked at and analyzed. I think citizen advisory committees play a really important role in the government process. The question and investigate materials that they're given to utilize expertise of others within the community. And I think it's important to understand the issues, not only from your constituents, who are your friends and neighbors, but also from the point of view of Public Works, and to achieve some sort of fair, responsible ordinance going forward. The existing ordinance and the proposed amendments have the potential to have a really significant impact on future finances of the ferry. We've identified some of these, and we want to collaborate with LIFAC to create a strong ordinance that sets the stage for operations going forward and addresses the needs both of ferry users and of Public Works. One specific example is that the current ordinance provides that any surplus fare box revenue shall be used for future operations. And that's just not really quite right, because any excess fare box revenue came from ferry fares that were paid. So that revenue, that surplus, should be set aside and held and used when there's a deficit from fares being paid, not just for future sort of undefined operational costs. It's fares paid, it's held in reserve. When there's a downfall in revenue from fares, that reserve is there to fill the gap. That's what it's for. That's just one specific example of an issue with the current ordinance. Another specific example of the proposed changes is the change to the definition of what is operational costs. And right now, the definition is actual operation costs. And what's been proposed is total operational expenses. That can be a significant difference and have a large impact on the ferry's financial picture going forward. So those are some of the reasons why we think an ad hoc committee is really important, that our working group has identified.
Thank you for your comments. That's 3 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you almost done, Jenna?
Yeah, good.
Charles Bailey, and he's online.
Good evening, LIFAC members. I'm Charles Bailey, and a member of the Ferry Working Group. I had the good fortune to serve 2 terms on LIFAC from 2016 to 2022. And I'd like to say a particular hello to the people I worked with.
Needs to unmute them.
No, there's
Can you hear me?
sound.
Charles, can we?
It's a problem with our setup here.
Could you pause for one moment?
Okay,
It's
Is it
sort of-
because you had that muted?
No, I don't know why. Up as high as it goes on the side. There, yeah.
You don't, that'll revert.
It'll only revert if it's somebody speaking in here. Is it possible to turn up this on TV?
It's up all the way. We just have a problem with the connection. So let me see if I can do something.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but the room can't hear you. So I know what it is. Now we need to turn off all the microphones in the room.
Everybody else muted.
Can you hear me
Hold
now?
on For a second.
Charles, you can start.
Can you hear me now? Yes? Oh, okay. Well, good evening, LIFAC members. I'm Charles Bailey and a member of the Ferry Working Group. I had the good fortune to serve 2 terms on LIFAC from 2016 to 2022. And I'd like to say a particular hello to the people I worked with who are still on LIFAC. That is Jim Dickinson, Judy Olson, Mike McKenzie, and Chris Colburn. I'd like to add my personal shout out to Chris. Evidently, not everyone on Lummi knows this, but when County Council created LIFAC in 2012, they required 2 of its 7 members should be off island. Chris Colburn of Bellingham has been one of the off island members since 2016. He's now in his 3rd term. No one else, none of us on Lummi Island, has served on LIFAC as long as Chris has. That's about 80 LIFAC monthly meetings so far. Chris, great work. Keep it up. Thank you. All of us, we did good work together. During those years, a new level of service, standard design criteria for the new ferry, and we voted to make it electric. During those years, we also reviewed the Public Works annual accounts for the ferry. We had surpluses, so why worry? But last fall, that situation changed. I can empathize with the challenge you've been faced with since then. On April 25th, County Council gave us citizens an opportunity to recommend changes to the ferry ordinance, and we have about a month. So what was before a challenge is now an opportunity. This is the chance, and now is the time to modernize the code, clarify it, and perhaps simplify it. Many good things will flow from this. I'll just mention 3 of them. First, as you know, Council has set aside $1 million in COVID relief ARPA funds for the ferry. If it turns out that less ARPA money is needed for the ferry, it seems likely, Council can reallocate the freed up funds to the food bank. This is a win-win for all residents in the county, every last one of us. Second, the new ferry system project is huge, $50 million. And in 2 years, the county will need to issue a sizable municipal bond to complete the funding package. Going into this, the ferry financial system needs to be clear, robust, transparent, in short, shipshape. And finally, future LIFAC members will thank you profoundly for having made their annual scrutiny of the ferry accounts so much easier. So as you review the existing code and proposed changes, I recommend you include the accounting and legal expertise of your neighbors in the ferry working group. LIFAC draws its strength from the support of its stakeholders. We have a deep bench of talent on Lummi Island. I encourage you to use it. Thank you.
Pam Gould.
David Kirschner. Oh, I'm sorry. You do.
Hi, my name is Pam Gould, and I'm a 50-plus year island resident and homeowner, and I was a commuter for most of those years. I'm here as the last speaker of the working group to reiterate our desire to work collaboratively with LIFAC, Public Works, and the Whatcom County Council. It has been a privilege to be part of this work group. We have not always agreed, but I have watched as members openly changed positions that were strongly held based on information from others' opinions or completely new information, and it is always respectful and an ongoing process. Businesses and government have seen the effects of various working groups on a project when each of them is working in a silo, creating their own information without the benefit of available shared information. As we navigate our way through ordinance amendments, fairs, and with the new ferry system on the horizon, let's be sure to use all of our amazing island resources. We are fortunate to have dedicated islanders with expertise and eagerness ready to assist LIFAC and Public Works. I urge LIFAC to approve and participate in the ad hoc committee we've requested so that we can all work collaboratively on the complex but critically important issues we face. An open working relationship will give us a chance to plan, adjust, and welcome our new ferry, despite the challenges and differing views that are likely to emerge during the process. Informed and active communities are able to plan and support each other, and collaborative communities are the most resilient. Citizens feel more confident making decisions when they have a chance to work with accurate, necessary information and to plan ahead. An ad hoc committee is just so appropriate now and a great example of what we can do in the future as well. Opportunities are magnified and exciting when we all work together. Thank you all for your tremendous work that you have done on the island's behalf and for your dedication to the work ahead. Our common ground is not only this island, but also the Whatcom Chief, our lifeline. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Ross, and I am the newly elected president of the Lummi Island Community Association, LICA. I have been involved with the ferry since the beginning of LICA. I'm LIFAC. I was also privileged to work with Carl Weimer and the folks that wrote the initial ordinance, and I have supported and really tried to help LIFAC in any way possible. And I have never served on LIFAC, but as the chair of LICA, we have teamed in the past a whole bunch to host the public meetings and town halls. And so I would like, at last night at our board meeting, LICA agreed that it would be really appropriate to have a time so that we can all come together as a community and have a town hall meeting. And LICA is offering and has decided that we're going to ask members of LIFAC that can come. We're going to invite hopefully somebody from Public Works that can come, and council members and anyone that is interested in like presenting like what we need to learn as a community. And we're going to rent the school. It's going to be either on the 31st of May or the 2nd of June, and in the evening, which is a Wednesday night or a Friday night. And we hope to have a respectful dialogue where the people that have information to share with the community can share with the community. The other thing that we are concerned about is, and we know that we will need to come together as a community to start discussing some of the implications with the transition to the new ferry. And we would like to have that as an opportunity for LIFAC to hear from members of the community too, as to what the community's needs and wants are. And our goal with this is to have the community come together and feel involved, because the thing that I walked away from last month's meeting with was just a really sad feeling that it didn't feel like the community had really gotten behind things. And I know the power that we have when we can all work together. So thank you. So you are officially invited.
We will work collaboratively. Thank you.
Great. Then David Kirshner, who's online.
Oh, let's see. There I am. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is David Kirshner, and my mother is right next to me. She's Jean Kirshner. We are full-time residents here on Lemmy Island, as is my brother, who lives up on Centerview. And I just wanted to express my gratitude for all the members of LIFAC for your service. I know that serving on a county committee can be a thankless task at times, having served on one for about 5 years. So, and especially those off-island members who have to make the trek out for these meetings when they do. So thank you. I also wanted to express my gratitude for making this meeting a hybrid meeting so that my mother and I could participate from home. I wanted to just address one item on the agenda, and that was the letter to the Lummi Nation. I heard secondhand that some members of the Lummi Nation have concerns about eelgrass on the gooseberry side around the gooseberry dock with respect to the new ferry. And I'm just wondering if it may be premature to be contacting the Lummi Nation about the name of the ferry, even though I enthusiastically submitted a name of a few years ago, I think, when that process started. And I'm just wondering, as a question, if LIFAC has considered approaching the Lummi Nation perhaps to do a listening session to see any concerns they might have about the new ferry and how those might be addressed. And all of that may be in process already, but I just wanted to bring that up, and I thank you all for your time.
Everybody that we had on the list, is there anybody else that wanted to speak before we move to the next section? All right, thank you very much. All right, we're going to go to Randy now, and he is going to explain the implication of the changes that sort of stopped everything from last month. And he's going to load his presentation. Hopefully everybody online can see it as well. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Hold on. You got a little second here. Can I answer a question, David? The new ferry shouldn't really have any increase of effect on the insurance. It's not a depot. Wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be any different than what we currently have, is what you're saying, Jim? Okay, thank you. I don't think we have enough yet. Mhm.
We could share, they could share what,
Leslie, did you figure out how to share the hosting?
do you want to? We can give out what you have, I say,
Yeah.
and they can,
So we have some copies. It's not enough for every person, but it's needed.
There's a power supply and you can plug it in there.
Screen with that one. It's on re-sign out. But it's all information.
Are you hosting?
So I am hosting.
Okay.
Just as a note, it was not recording previously, so all the meeting has been recording.
on the Zoom.
Okay, but it's now recording? Okay, thank you. Your notes will have to be good.
So Mary, if you go ahead and mute, I will share my screen. Yes. Hey, sorry, Randy Rydell here, Whatcom County Public Works. Richard Fry, just because I can see you in my video, can you shake your head if you can hear me and if you can see my screen? Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, so I am here again to discuss something long awaited, I think. The last time I was in front of you all, I provided this graph that was for fare box, the cumulative fare box deficit, and it showed numbers that none of us wanted to see, but numbers as they had been calculated based on reading of the code. So I'm here today to say that this is not the one that we're going with. So we have to leave that behind. New information was provided to me the day of the meeting, or the day before the meeting. I think I got to it the day of the meeting, that made me question some of the motor vehicle fuel tax, what was getting paid for in the motor vehicle fuel tax. And so I'm going to go over that discussion today and let everybody know where we're at with the fare box, cumulative fare box deficit as we know it now. So this new information, first off, we have, I'm going to back up and say my slides are probably a little bit out of order from the way I want to go, but I want to go with the way I feel for you guys. The ferry receives two different subsidies from the state. And one of those is motor vehicle fuel tax. Well, I should say, sorry, one of those is ferry deficit reimbursement, is what its name is. That is in RCW 4668090 in the distribution there. That RCW lists out all the monies that come out of the motor vehicle statewide fuel tax collection. And that money, because of that RCW, it's pulled out ahead of time. There's one more subsidy that comes to the ferry through motor vehicle fuel tax, and that comes through the County Road Administration Board. And what they do is, after all these top pieces have come off the motor vehicle fuel tax, they get the remaining amount to distribute between the 39 counties around Washington. In that distribution, they look at how many roads you have, how many gravel roads you have, how many bridges you have, all these different things. including whether you have a ferry. And they say, how much do each one of those cost to operate? And because we have a ferry and 3 other counties have a ferry, they decided to put a little bit more into the calculation for those counties with ferries. And that is known as the motor vehicle fuel tax attributable to ferry operations. So knowing those 2 names, ferry deficit reimbursement, which is a agreement with Washot, and these motor vehicle fuel tax attributable to ferry, the reading of this use of ferry user fees, this is Whatcom County Code 1034-030. Down at the bottom here, it's the beginning January 2007, any interest income or income from state motor vehicle fuel tax or ferry operations, sounds a lot like that crab board one, will be deducted from the actual operating costs. And that interpretation of it is where that previous, I'm going to jump back, where this one came from, saying that that's supposed to be the motor vehicle fuel tax that's attributable to ferries because those are the same names. The famous Monson memo states in there that the ferry deficit reimbursement money also comes out of that same pot of money. And so I looked at our state reporting system. I looked at the RCW and said, yep, it is. Because the ferry deficit reimbursement money comes out of that same pot, it is income from state motor vehicle fuel tax for ferry operations. As soon as I heard that, called up legal counsel and said, hey, do we have an option? Is there an ability to say that this is reasonable interpretation that hasn't been followed correctly? And we talked through the ramifications of it and got an opinion from the lawyer, not an official opinion, but we got their go ahead that said, yeah, it's reasonable. Why don't you go back and look at the notes in the meeting leading up to this? And I looked at those. In those notes, it was a little bit obscure. There was someone who stood up at the meeting and said that the ferry deficit reimbursement money came from a deficit reimbursement account of the state. You know, so there was question. And at the time we moved forward with these calculations in 2007, one of these was chosen. And it was just the ferry deficit reimbursement money, not the other money that was attributable from CRAB. At this time, we believe that it's reasonable to say, we don't know. It's not clear. It's not clearly written in here. And we think that we should be putting both of those funding sources in because we don't know. And so what that ends up doing is, this is the implications of it, adding both of them in, and we're going to go to the next page here that says it changes this ferry fund, as we call it now, the ATO calculation. Hopefully people have gotten on board with that terminology, even if you don't like the code changes. The ATO calculation is the calculation of what expenses are actually going to be recoverable by farebox. So with the old calculations, we didn't have the ferry deficit reimbursement money in here. We just had this motor vehicle fuel tax credit. And consequently, from 2006 to 2022, the amount of expense that needed to be covered by either farebox or other funding sources was $42.8 million. With this new interpretation, we take $3.6 million off of that, and it brings it down to $39 million worth of collection. We're following, we can say that the $39 million, 55% of that per code is required to be covered by farebox, and that gives us a $21 million recovery need. That's our goal for recovery. Over the years, 2006 through 2022, we've actually recovered $22.5 million. So good job. With this recalculation, we're $1 million ahead. So it is a recalculation. This is something that at this point, it's Public Works intent to move forward and ask council for a resolution that says, we believe, so the facts of the statement are that this was passed in 2008 when this ordinance was passed, this provision of the ordinance. It was unclear at the time, but at the time a calculation was done through 2022. We believe that there was room for interpretation in that definition, that description of the way the law was written. And we would like council to retroactively go back to 2007 and let us include this in the calculation. And a resolution from council, if approved, would be council's approval that we're moving forward with this new interpretation. And that's the way we're going to interpret it moving forward. I will also say that this same interpretation is what has already been included in the code change. The code change already included these numbers in this motor vehicle fuel tax and ferry deficit reimbursement money in the calculation. So Public Works is trying to move forward with that before this memo was even located and before this problem was found. So, are we all good so far? Okay. We're gonna move on then.
I do have one question.
Yes.
So we talk about a ferry reserve fund, right? Basically, we're talking about the operating reserves.
We are talking about yes, we'll hold that, but yeah, go ahead and ask your question. And
so do we, like the city of Bellingham has a general fund and they have an ordinance for their general fund that says that they should have a reserve amount of about 15%.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a guidance for what the reserve amount should be in the operating fund for the ferry?
We do not.
Randy, would you please restate the question?
Yeah, certainly. The question from Todd was, Todd, right? Todd was whether we have a ordinance or policy that states how much reserve should be held in the ferry fund for operations. And no, I'm not aware of one. I know it has been discussed over the years. It's been discussed as I've been at LIFAC meetings. But that is a great conversation to be had and something that I think would be worthwhile to go for.
Yeah, and he's got something in here that's going to actually address that.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we move forward, you can see the line, the red line was the old fare box deficit chart. The blue line is the new one. So yes, there's some rejoicing. It's understandable. Yeah, this is me excited. So 2022 is where we ended the year. We went from last time a negative, a deficit of $1 million to now a positive surplus of $1 million. And you can see though where the trend heads from here. And keep in mind, this trend is not based on dolphin repairs. It's based on expenses that have come down the road, more expensive dry docks, more expensive wages, more expensive Sandy cans, everything that adds up to these ferry operations has gone up in expense. And they've gone up in expense without the fares raising and without ridership increasing. So these projections that show it going down, they show that steep decline. It's prudent for us to be looking to level that decline out so that we don't lose money on it. Yeah.
One of the issues brought up when the new ferry was being imagined was that one of the problems with Whatcom Chief is because of its age, dry dock costs were escalating, and that having a new ferry would likely make dry dock costs not continue to escalate. Is that included in your calculation?
So I'll restate the question real quick, is that with a new ferry, there's an assumption that dry dock costs won't cost as much, or repairs in general may not cost as much. And is that in this calculation? First off, this calculation is through 2006 or 26. We will not have a new ferry by then. And what we need though, is we need a ferry to keep operating until then. We can't bridge the gap with a foot ferry if we don't have money to do the repairs. And if this results in some kind of fair change in the future with the new ferry, then that's great. That's part of why we've rewritten the code to look at this every year and see where we're at with things. But the reality is right now, this is the trend without anything major happening. The trend is downward. Does that answer? Okay. Todd?
Yeah, one more question. I'm gonna assume that you didn't actually find $3.6 million in a shoebox in St. Paul's office, that it actually came out of a different fund.
I think that'll be addressed shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So once again, without comparing the two, this is where we're at. The newly calculated fare box projects that we'll have still a fare box surplus of $150,000 at the end of 2024. That's with that no fare increase. That $150,000 is about it's the fare box contribution to 1 month's worth of operating expenses for the ferry. So a lot of times people in business will talk about how much they need in reserves. As Todd had mentioned before, they may put 15% or something like that. Just for a little guidance on this slide, I put in a line for 3 months and 6 months of expense reserve, really. And that's what these two lines in here are. They are intended to help give guidance to those who want to be looking at these about maybe where the fare box deficit and reserve, where that balance should be. I don't think that operating it at a zero, I don't think anybody likes living paycheck to paycheck. But that's why there's some guidance in here on that. The expenses that I use for this, I used a 3-month or 3-year rolling average so that it wouldn't spike any one year because of this, or drop any year because we didn't take the boat out or something like that. So those are kind of the guidelines. You can see that as of 2022, I should say partway through 2022, we'll drop down below this, this 792,000, which is the 6 month. And by the end of 2023, we're expected to have that 3 months worth as the reserve. And keep in mind, we're starting 2022 with $1 million in there. So Todd's next question about where the money came from. Where the money came from and where the money is has been a big question that I know, because if you call the Whatcom County Treasurer and you ask what the ferry fund balance is for 2022, Steve, sorry, Mr. Oliver will let you know that there was $2.1 million of cash in the ferry fund. Now, that $2.1 million is attributable to two different pots of money combined. One of them is Farebox. We've already talked about it, the $1 million of Farebox that you all have over contributed to the fund. The other is $1 million of road fund that has been over contributed to the fund. Yes, Ralph.
Sorry, interrupt you.
Oh, okay.
A month ago, we were told that the road fund over could be $3 million,
Yeah.
3.6.
Yes.
And that was the 1.5 million 2006/7 initial contribution, plus over contribution we did 4,500 with a fifth, 4,000 gross, which we had another 1.5 million, and that 3 million is in the bank. And the deficit for the fare box was $1 million, and that offset to get 2.1 million. Now we're told that the road fund has over contributed 1 million. A $2 million difference.
Yeah, the before, the way the numbers work out is if there's $2 million in the fund and the fare box has not collected to use old numbers, and I don't really want to go back to old numbers because this is what it is, but to use old numbers, if the fare box goes below zero, which it in the old calculation, it was well below zero. It was $1 million below zero. No one else contributed money to that other than the road fund. And so that's $1 million loan, essentially, on top of $2 million of cash in the fund. That's where the $3 million number came from at that time. So
going forward, the proposal is to have both funds, cash, go into revenue into the ferry fund.
no. Going forward, it is Public Works' intent to remove the excess road fund contribution. Because the way this fund is intended to work is that you all should be able to look at it and see what the balance is and know that that is the balance that came from fares. And the road fund has the money to be able to contribute on a moment's notice, they're 45%. So
from an actual accounting perspective, both funds.
Okay, you know what, Ralph, I really
Okay,
do appreciate
sure.
your questions, and maybe
Yeah.
you guys can talk about that later, but we do need to move
Okay.
on because we have other.
Thank
things
you.
that we're really getting to.
sorry, yes, and I told you I wouldn't take this much time.
Okay.
Apologize.
Yeah.
So what we have here in this graph is a look at where the cash goes. And as I mentioned, the road fund it's the road fund intent to pull out that excess contribution that they have made and pay in just the 45% per that ATO calculation that is required of them, because it gets too confusing when the road fund excess cash is commingled in that fund. We don't plan on doing it all this year. If it comes out by 2024, what we will have is we will have that fund will work like it's supposed to. You can look at the cash balance and know that that's the excess of fares. And as it starts to get low, that something is needed in terms of a fare increase. It'll be a bright line. So that looked kind of bad, right? I don't know if you saw that last one, 2025. That's where cumulative fare box is going. So if we look and say, let's perhaps imagine a 15% increase in 2024 and a 10% increase in 2025 and a 10% increase in 2026. What we get there is we get this trend to start to level out and we don't go negative. And those are much more moderate increases is prescribed. We don't know what will happen in 2025. We don't know what ridership will do. We may have to adjust it. You may have to adjust it. It may have to be adjusted. And it can be adjusted because it can be looked at every year. That kind of modeling of 15-10-10 provides a baseline fare box reserve for right now. We don't know what it'll look like in the future. All we can do is say, where might it go to help give the island a sense of what they can expect, because they can't stay zero. So I think that's all that I have.
Thanks. So I'll just
So-
take one or two quick questions and then we can move on. Todd and then
Yeah. I appreciate the pointed about the reserves amount. What did you use to determine that? Because I know there's the Government Accounting Standards Board that sets certain ideas about whether you should have 90 days or a certain amount based on the type of fund that it is. Did you use those rules, or where did you come up with the 3 to 6 months?
I did not use, I put them in purely as a baseline because I know that a lot of people have business experience, and business experience tends to yield 3 to 6 months as a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
But I said the only microphone that's on is Randy's.
Oh, sorry.
Restate the question.
The question from Todd was just about whether a government standard had been utilized to come up with these 3-month fare box goals and 6-month fare box goal lines, these dashed lines in here, and that no, those lines were just based off of some business practices.
Ralph, quickly?
Any update on the position regarding dolphins? And any update on ARPA? And Mark, you said 1.308 eligible.
So Ralph was asking about updates on dolphins and about ARPA, and ARPA is not my deal. It's the council and the executives. So I don't have an update on that. And I'm not sure what an update on dolphins would be.
Okay, so
I don't
that's-
think that's Randy's
Yeah.
purview though.
Yeah, and the update on the,
I think it's,
the
Thank you.
ARPA funds, they had a council meeting yesterday and they were put on hold as far as, so there was no ARPA funds allocated to the ferry fund as of yet. Primarily because of this new information. So at least that was from Todd Donovan. Todd, do you want to speak to that anymore? Is he online?
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Todd, did you want to speak to whether or not ARPA funds will be available, or is that for a further date? Okay, all right. Okay, so we won't worry about that. Okay, and was there another question? Yes, right here.
Just had a question looking at the chart and where your peak is and where first of all coincides with COVID and 2 years worth of lost ridership, which would then be covered by the ARPA. So it's really a unusual situation. The ferry has time for essential services only. Ridership would pay down because of COVID. So it's actual, but it's actual with a deficit in ridership. So the ARPA should cover that, which would even out that.
Yeah, and that is definitely a council issue versus a Randy issue, but definitely heard you. Appreciate that. Okay, Randy, thank you. Really appreciate the presentation, and hopefully that provided a lot of clarity with exactly where we are
yeah, there's
right
gonna
now.
be a test on that. Everybody ready?
Yeah. So,
Okay, sorry.
okay, real quickly, Rich, go ahead. Can you unmute?
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So Randy, I just had a couple of questions about the assumptions that you're making in these charts, which we've been seeing for so many months now. And in particular, since these are probably going to be tied to some kind of fare increase sometime in the next few years, could you clarify for us what the assumptions are that you're making about, one, how ridership is going to change, whether there's a price change or not, simply due to the end of COVID? And two, what assumptions you're making about consumer response to any fare increases should they come about? There's a footnote in your earlier chart that suggested that your assumption is that price increases will have no effect whatsoever on consumer behavior. Is that still the case? Thanks.
There we go. I'm unmuted. I have not modeled in, let's see, first off was an increase in ridership. So the ridership going up because COVID's done. And the other was ridership going down because fares are increasing. I have modeled either of those things in. Those are beyond my modeling capabilities to know to make any assumptions either way. So I have modeled this as 23, 24, and 25 with the same ridership as 2022. It's as best we can get.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I'd like to address the request from the work group to form an ad hoc committee. So I'd like to see if one of the members would like to make a motion to consider that.
I'd move to consider that.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, discussion? So what's proposed, I'll just go there. And Bob, if you want to add anything, let me read this real quickly and then we'll see if you want to add anything. Okay. So this basically would be a work group or ad hoc group of the LIFAC, which would have 3 LIFAC members and 4 members of the working group to make recommendations specific to the amendments to the ordinance 1034 to Whatcom County governing the ferry system. So they have proposed a few members to join. I'd like to propose myself, Mike, and Chris as the 3 LIFAC members. No, we can't have any more than 3 LIFAC members at a meeting at any time, or it's a public meeting. So that's the restriction on 3. We'll get together right after this meeting very shortly. We'll meet, we'll try to come up with some recommendations that we can all agree on, that we can propose and vote on by our meeting on the 14th. If we have something substantive, then we'll forward it to council at that time. So that's sort of what we're proposing. Bob, did you want to add anything to that?
Hold up one second.
Ready? Yeah, I'm pleased that the LIFAC is considering this. I think we can tell just by a meeting, the various meetings we have here, that it's hard to get, detailed work, precise thinking done, in a free exchange. So that was the rationale for our having this ad hoc committee. We realize you operate under certain limitations. We'd like to take those away. Let's get in a room. Let's pull the shades down. Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's get to work on some of these really nitty-gritty issues.
As long as I'm not held hostage, I'm all for this. Okay.
No, we don't take hostages. No. But we are really ready to do this. We have the 4 people that our work group has identified to work with you are Diane Harper. Diane has extensive experience from back in the task force days. She's worked with public works. She really brings a lot to the table. Janice Holmes, an attorney, has a lot of code knowledge, code language development knowledge, and Peter Earle as well. They've been in and around these issues for a long time. I will participate as well, hopefully in a way that I can help bring the group together to be really constructive, respectful, and frankly, successful in coming up with some consensus decisions. So we welcome this. We hope you'll vote it in.
Okay, thanks. More discussion, Judy?
Yes, a couple of items, and I'm printed off this from Jill. So there's a few things to consider about this. Number one is to consider whether it's a permanent or temporary subcommittee.
So the proposal is that it's temporary,
Okay.
it's only lasts until the next meeting.
So where's this proposal? Formal. Is there a form?
No,
Okay.
it's just,
Okay,
it's
so
very informal.
So the communication so far has been that it is temporary.
Correct. It's temporary until the next meeting. With the
temporary until the next LIFAC meeting?
Correct.
Thank you.
Limited term.
And it's a limited term, and its sole purpose is to work on the ordinance. And changes in the ordinance, nothing else that they'll be working on.
Okay.
In checking through it with Jill, I was assured we didn't have to run it through legal to do it that way.
Okay.
So that's why we're doing it.
Okay, those were my questions.
Okay.
I think I might have one more. Jill had some comments about whether it's going to be subject to OPA.
She said because it was
rules.
short term, 1 month only, informal in nature, we did not need to run it by legal for that. It did not,
meaning
it
that
did,
it will not
would
be
not
subject.
be subject to Open Public Meeting Act, the
Right.
act.
And the three LIFAC.
So only three
is a
members,
key
correct, right.
Matter there.
Yeah.
I like it.
Pam?
And I think our vision, or the community's vision really is in hopes that we could do this kind of ad hoc committee work on numerous different topics.
Yes.
As things go forward, we bring together a group, we work out something, that's over, and it starts again, and that's a great model to work through.
Okay.
And this,
Can you
yeah.
restate what you said it is?
So Pam said that the group's intention was that this become a model that can be used going forward with the myriad of issues that we're going to have related to the ferry as we move through the next 4 years and then into the new ferry. So, other questions? Todd, did you have a question?
I'm going to speak against this because how would we feel if the county council got together and made a motion to create an ad hoc committee where 3 of their members were going to get together with other members of the public and work on something and then present that? I think some of us would feel that we wanted that to be part of the more open process. So I just think that there's nothing that says that you can't email or set something up where it is, but when we put an ad hoc committee together with the blessing of this, it becomes a little more official. And if it's truly ad hoc, I'd rather see it be a few people put out an email and do that privately versus through the LIFAC.
Okay.
That's just my thoughts.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other discussion?
I
Jim?
would go for it because, we had one once before. And it really got us into places, got us information that we wouldn't have otherwise got.
Okay.
And I would just say, I think the point of having limited term and a limited objective helps kind of keep it in bounds. I know some of what Jim is referring to. We have also had not such positive experiences with side committees, and the model can work. It is not always good.
And Todd, to your comments, I think the general understanding that any recommendations from this ad hoc committee come back to this committee.
Yeah. Okay.
Todd, I would also say, I appreciate the thoughts. I had those thoughts, but I like putting organization to it because it's been a big email campaign and it hasn't always been pleasant or conclusive.
They've gotten in trouble.
Okay, so let's go ahead and are we ready to take a vote?
Are we ready? Is discussion done? Are we done with this?
Are we done?
anymore?
Anybody else?
Question.
Okay, okay. All those in favor of forming a limited term special focus group with the members of the work committee that have been proposed with the sole intent of coming back with a recommendation or not by the June 14th LIFAC meeting for us to discuss. All those in favor? So in favor, Mike, Judy, me, favor, Jim, against? Todd and Rich Fry.
And you may
He's 4.
He said
Can you hear me?
Did Todd say yes or no? I haven't seen. He said yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, oh, but he doesn't get a vote.
No, I'm talking. Oh. He's not a voter.
So
Yeah.
just to be sure that I have the record clear, we're all
Yes.
in favor except, and
Todd
you
is a no.
abstain or against? Okay.
Again, so he's a no, 6 yeses, so the committee is formed. So we will discuss after for our next meeting date. Thank you very much. Okay, next item that we have on the agenda is Mike. You wanted to talk a little bit about a process for naming the ferry. I know we've put this off for 3 months, so I'm giving you 5 minutes.
I appreciate David's Kirshner's remarks.
Okay.
David, I believe it's coming up on 2 years this summer that you and many other islanders put in recommended names for the ferry. So this has been on the agenda and off the agenda for several months, but it's been 2 years in the making since we were informed by Public Works that it would be a positive to have the ferry named as we move forward at that time to get funding. But now certain things can happen if it has a name. That's beyond me. So here's my proposal for task force, and it's very, and I'm using that term loosely. It's a proposal for naming the new ferry, the replacement ferry, and it's wide open to any additions, public or committee. But this is a starting point, and I do think it's time to get the wheels turning. Also, in terms of David's comment, is that two different things. This will merely be the letter that we've written and are submitting to the Lummi Nation, and proposing tonight, several other letters like it will go out, and it's simply asking for a format to name the new ferry. The intent of this is to involve all the sectors of stakeholders in naming the replacement vessel. LIFAC would create this process involving various stakeholder sectors who would, on their time, gather suggestions for the new ferry's name from within the areas that they represent. And I'll give you some of those in a moment. The groups would submit suggested names, 1 or 2 recommended, from consensus within their group, present those to LIFAC. LIFAC would select a name from the suggestions or 2 for its recommendation and advise the county council. Ultimately, the county council determines the name of the new ferry. I recommend that the process comprise the following representing stakeholder groups that would report back to us if they choose to. They would include LIFAC, the Lummi Island Community Association, LICA, the Lummi Nation, Whatcom County Fire District 11, Whatcom County Public Works, Lummi Island Ferry Crew, the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce to represent more of the county. And then there are other possibilities. It could be other chambers. There are 7 chambers of commerce in this county, like Ferndale and Birch Bay and so forth. Outside of this process, I volunteer to write a letter to the specific vendors and service companies that use the ferry on an ongoing regular basis, such as propane providers, the SSC, the trash and recycling, FedEx, UPS, USPS, Ferndale School District, Puget Sound Energy, and any other suggested sectors. Each sector would decide on its own the method for gathering their suggestions and report it back to LIFAC. LIFAC's only involvement would be to invite the selected representative stakeholders into the process and then collect their respective submissions for consideration and making a final recommendation to the council.
Okay.
Can I make time on that?
Yeah, and so what questions do you guys have of him right now on this? And what is your proposed action? What would you like? What do you need from us right now, Mike? Okay.
Approval. To send us, to start sending letters.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I just want to make sure we get the wheels turning. I think we need anything formal.
Okay, I don't think so either. Comment? Tom?
Yeah, I don't think that LIFAC should be reaching out directly to the Lummi Nation. We are an advisory committee to the county council. And it should be the county council in a government to government communication that does that. We are an advisory role, and we would be asking them to communicate with a lesser government. I think that the most appropriate thing is for us to advise county council to do that.
And there's a little more under that. We have someone in Public Works is the designated liaison with the nation. And he suggested doing it this way, that asking the nation to suggest a person who could participate in the process.
That was Roland Middleton.
But that communication should probably come from the county council.
So what if it's LIFAC on behalf of Whatcom County Council?
We advise them, we don't act on behalf of.
I think we can ask him about he's done that liaison service for council and the executive. So we can ask more detail.
And then the only other comment that I had me thinking a little bit, as you mentioned, reaching out to the service providers is, as you see WTA buses drive around town, they actually have advertising on them that contribute to their operation fund. And is that something that we could actually do with service providers on the island to actually offset some of the costs associated with running the ferry and everything, which, would help reduce the need for fare increases potentially going forward?
I'd like to put all that in writing and let's talk about that again.
I'll send an email and
we've got time. This is not
right.
urgent,
Yeah.
but I like the thought.
Okay, thank you.
And I just add the subject of having some kind of advertising or that kind of thing on or in the ferry has come up for the new ferry.
Okay.
One last thought is that the idea on this sheet of paper, it may be somebody I haven't thought of, but I try to include a mass of people that use the ferry on a regular basis. All these different sectors meet that, and there may be others.
Okay. Nice job, Mike. Thank you. Oh, Judy, do you have a question?
I just wanted to make one quick comment, and I think that we'll come back and visit this, but my personal opinion is, I like the KISS principle. And I honestly don't know that involving
for us.
Involving the service sector is, I would leave them out, but that's just my comment for the record.
Okay.
And one other comment, probably everybody knows this, but in case not, in sometime during last fall, we learned that before new construction can begin on the new ferry, it must have a name. So that was something I'd never heard of. So,
which is why there is a bit of urgency.
Sort of a reason for getting this started with plenty of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that. I do have a quick update from Rich Hudson, who is absent because he is down with the chief in Seattle, and all the repairs are going well. And they have uncovered nothing untoward that's going to cost more money or take more time. So at this point, they are scheduled to be back on time on, I believe it was the 20th. So far, so good is the update from Rich. And we were tentatively supposed to have Roland back here next month to talk about the new terminal construction. We're calling it new terminal constriction. Typo, maybe Freudian, I don't know. And talk about the eelgrass beds. But because we will likely be talking about the ordinance, I'm not sure we're going to have time for both. So we will probably push that one off till July. But I've got to get with Roland and make sure he can actually be here in July. Mary Ross did also mention, however, that she was going to invite Roland to attend the LIFAC community meeting, which that might be a good thing as well. So, okay. Any other action items that we need to discuss?
I just want to make a couple of comments. That will be very brief. one is thank you all for being here, and almost as many of you, or as many as of you out there, they're on Zoom, and thank you as well for being on Zoom and for putting that on, Leslie. I'm grateful tonight for the presentations. The ideas were very solid and were presented in a very nice way, and I love that. I wanted to point out something you said briefly, and it kind of went under the radar, Chris. I think it's important to know this. We've had an unintended blessing with LIFAC ever since the form of being 5-2 Islanders and off Islanders. It's structured to be 4-3. So that's a blessing. Okay. Now,
All right.
the other quick comment was that came up, I think Jimmy, you raised it, is that without entering into who felt what, including us, last month's meeting went precisely according to the Robert's rules, period.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So with that, any other new business, new items, Jim?
Yeah, well, one of them is, I think, this is coming back to the committees. That I think that we need to start thinking about having a committee to look at the new ferry design. Because you know that I'm one of the ones kind of a detractor of it. And the more I find, the more it seems that way. And so I think that would be one thing. And this is something, one of the things I really worry about. I have personally entered Geezerhood and was given the doctor wanted me to have a handicap pass, and so far I have not been able to use it. There's no spaces. And the other thing was that in talking to the fire department, except this dry dock that happened, I haven't talked to them the last 2 days. They've had only one day. This was previous back 2 days that they did not have at least one emergency carryover, including 2 fatalities. And that I think that the situation that we have with the pass-me vote is not a good idea for the aging of the island. And I would like to also look into because I did find out that the ferry track indeed does have a current license, and it has never lapsed, and it went through all the Coast Guard inspections and everything else, and it is available. And we may have to change the way of dealing with that somewhat the Warren County does now.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Anything else?
At some point, could I make one final comment? I don't know.
Briefly right now, go for it.
Thank you. I wanted to underscore the announcement by Mary Ross about the public forum that LIFAC is going to be forming and publicizing for everybody, probably June 2nd, most likely. And that also motivates our ad hoc committee to do whatever we can as quickly as we can. Maybe even to have something to say, who knows, at that time. So I'm really enthused about the fact that the whole island is going to have an open door and an open forum to talk about these things that we can all listen to and contribute to. Thanks for tonight.
Thanks, Bob. All right, so before I adjourn, I would just like to thank all of you for coming. As Mike said, thank you to my fellow committee members, as well as Rich online. Leslie and Bob, thank you so much for doing the Zoom. Really, really appreciate that. Okay. Yeah. And thank you to the working group. Very much appreciate that. And lastly, Randy, thank you very much for coming.
Yes,
appreciate that.
thank you,
Okay. And so with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.